There is a certain kind of attack that doesn't strike your outer world, but aims directly at the invisible foundation that holds you together. It's not about stealing your possessions, discrediting your reputation, or even challenging your ideas. It's about targeting the spirit, that quiet, inner fortress that gives you the strength to keep moving forward, even when everything else seems uncertain. When someone deliberately seeks to fracture that core, they are not operating from a place of power. They are acting from the unacknowledged depths of their own shadows. These attacks are rarely obvious. They appear through subtle undermining, carefully timed criticism, or manipulative emotional games designed to create doubt where there was once clarity. The irony is that their efforts say far more about them than they do about you. People who target another spirit are often driven by unseen fractures within themselves. Somewhere inside, they have encountered parts of their psyche that they cannot accept, wounds they have never healed, or insecurities they cannot face. Rather than confronting this inner landscape, they project it outward. The attempt to weaken someone else becomes a way to temporarily escape the discomfort of their own inner truth. What they perceive in you, a kind of wholeness, resilience, or authenticity, becomes intolerable to their fragmented self. So they try to break it, not because you are weak, but because your strength threatens the fragile narratives they use to hold themselves together. The shadow is clever. It operates beneath awareness, influencing behaviors in ways that even the person themselves may not fully understand. A person may attack your confidence while believing they are simply being honest. They may try to isolate you while convincing themselves they are just setting boundaries. They may gossip, manipulate, or subtly demean, all the while unaware that these actions stem from their own unresolved fears and desires. The shadow wants to remain hidden, and one of the most effective ways it hides is by turning its own traits into accusations against others. When someone points relentlessly at your supposed flaws, they may be unconsciously revealing the very traits they fear to face in themselves. There is also a strange psychological comfort in trying to dismantle another's inner strength. When your spirit stands firm, it acts like a mirror. It reflects back to others the places where they have compromised, abandoned their ideals, or failed to integrate their deeper nature. For someone unwilling to confront these reflections, breaking your spirit becomes a way to shatter the mirror itself. If they can make you doubt yourself, they no longer have to face the dissonance created by your presence. Your light exposes their darkness, so they attempt to dim it, believing this will bring them peace. This is why attacks on the spirit are often most intense in moments when you stand authentically in your truth. The more clearly you embody your inner values, the more uncomfortable those who live in denial of their own shadows may become. It is not that they consciously decide to bring you down, rather, something in them reacts instinctively to the threat your authenticity poses. Like a wound that flinches when touched, their hidden insecurities recoil in the presence of strength, and that recoil turns into hostility, envy, or covert sabotage. Understanding this dynamic allows you to see these attacks for what they are: reflections of someone else's inner turmoil. Instead of internalizing their words and actions as accurate assessments of your worth, you can recognize them as projections. You become less vulnerable to emotional manipulation when you understand that their cruelty is not born from insight, but from avoidance. Their attempts to undermine are not revelations of your flaws, but evidence of their own unresolved pain. This perspective also helps explain why such individuals are often persistent. When you do not break easily, their shadow feels even more exposed. Your continued presence becomes a kind of silent confrontation, a reminder that what they project onto you has its source within them. The more they try to bring you down, the more they reveal about themselves. Each attempt to fracture your spirit uncovers another layer of their unacknowledged darkness. In relationships, workplaces, or social circles, these dynamics play out repeatedly. The person who constantly criticizes others' ambition may secretly resent their own unfulfilled potential. The one who ridicules emotional strength might be repressing deep vulnerability. The individual who tries to control others' lives often struggles with an inner chaos they cannot regulate. In all these cases, targeting another's spirit serves as a way to distract from their internal disarray. It is easier to focus on breaking someone else than to face the uncomfortable task of integrating their shadow. When you understand that those who target the spirit reveal their own shadows, you begin to perceive patterns that once felt personal as psychological mechanisms playing out beneath the surface. Their actions stop feeling like mysteries and start making sense as inevitable expressions of their internal state. This understanding doesn't make their behavior acceptable, but it strips it of its power to define your worth. It allows you to step back emotionally, to observe rather than absorb, to respond from clarity rather than react from hurt. This realization is not about superiority, but about insight. It's not about labeling others as villains, but about recognizing the deep, often unconscious forces that shape human behavior. People act out their shadows when they lack the courage or the tools to face them directly. Your strength, your authenticity, your inner light, these become unintentional catalysts, drawing their hidden struggles to the surface. And in that reaction, they reveal far more than they intend. Resilience is not a loud declaration of strength. It's often a quiet, unwavering presence that endures even when the storm refuses to pass. It doesn't always look heroic from the outside. Sometimes it looks like getting up one more time when everything inside you whispers to stop. Sometimes it looks like refusing to bend to lies, even when the truth is inconvenient, painful, or isolating. What many fail to understand is that resilience doesn't just protect you, it forces truth into the open. It has a way of drawing hidden motives, concealed intentions, and unspoken realities to the surface simply by continuing to exist without collapsing. When you remain resilient in the face of deception, betrayal, or injustice, you interrupt the pattern that thrives on your submission. Many people and situations depend on your silence, exhaustion, or surrender to keep their illusions intact. Lies rely on you giving up before they are exposed. Manipulation counts on you losing hope so the charade can continue unchallenged. Resilience disrupts this entire structure because it refuses to disappear. Over time, this persistence creates pressure, not on you, but on the falsehood itself. Truth begins to seep out through cracks that resilience slowly widens. This happens because time is a powerful ally to resilience. Deceptions are often constructed like fragile buildings held together by fear, control, or the expectation that no one will question too much. These structures can appear solid in the short term, but they cannot withstand prolonged exposure to someone who endures with clarity and patience. The longer resilience stands, the more unstable these facades become. Contradictions start to emerge. Those who hide behind masks struggle to maintain consistency. The storylines built to manipulate others eventually tangle under the weight of their own complexity. Resilience doesn't have to actively attack. It simply waits, watches, and remains steadfast until truth has no choice but to reveal itself. On a personal level, resilience acts like a mirror to other people's behavior. When you refuse to break down under pressure, those around you are forced to confront the reality of their actions. If someone has treated you unjustly, your continued stability becomes an uncomfortable reminder of their wrongdoing. If someone has tried to deceive you, your patience slowly exposes their inability to maintain the lie indefinitely. Many truths remain hidden not because they are well protected, but because people collapse too early for them to surface. When you stand firm, you give truth the time and space it needs to emerge. There is also a psychological element at play. Those who construct false narratives or lie behind facades rely heavily on control. They control the narrative, the environment, or the emotional responses of others to sustain their illusion. Resilience undermines this control when you do not react as expected, when you do not crumble under emotional pressure. You break their rhythm. Their manipulations stop working the way they used to. This disruption often causes stress, frustration, or slips that reveal more than they intended. Over time, resilience quietly dismantles the stage on which deception performs. Resilience is not passive. It's an active, internal stance of refusal to let falsehood define reality. It involves staying grounded in what you know to be true, even when others try to rewrite the script. It means holding on to integrity when others hope you will trade it for acceptance or ease. It requires emotional discipline because resilience isn't about winning short-term battles. It's about outlasting the illusion until reality can no longer be denied. This kind of endurance gradually corners deception, forcing it to either transform or collapse. In relationships, resilience can reveal dynamics that were previously obscured by charm, power plays, or emotional dependency. When someone tries to gaslight or manipulate, and you remain emotionally steady rather than reactive, they lose their leverage. Their behavior starts to reveal itself more clearly because your resilience gives them nothing to hide behind. Their excuses sound thinner. Their actions become more desperate or contradictory. The longer you hold your ground, the more the truth begins to unmask itself without you needing to expose it manually. On a broader scale, resilience operates similarly within social groups, organizations, or communities. And corrupt systems and toxic cultures persist, not because they are invincible, but because individuals give up too soon. When even a few people remain resilient, refusing to accept the false narrative, continuing to speak with clarity, continuing to endure, the cracks start to widen. Over time, patterns emerge, stories align or contradict, and hidden motives become undeniable. Resilience becomes a silent investigative force, pushing truth upward through layers of denial and resistance. This process can be slow and uncomfortable. Resilience requires tolerating ambiguity and delay, living in the tension between knowing something is wrong and waiting for it to reveal itself fully. Many people struggle with this part. They want immediate vindication or clarity, but truth doesn't always operate on our timeline. Deception can be sophisticated and entrenched. It takes time for pressure to build, for masks to slip, for inconsistencies to accumulate. But resilience is patient. It doesn't demand speed. It trusts in inevitability. This inevitability stems from a simple psychological reality: falsehood is inherently unstable. Lies must be maintained constantly. Truth simply exists. Deception requires energy, coordination, and vigilance to keep the illusion intact. Resilience drains that energy by not collapsing. The longer you hold steady, the more difficult it becomes for deception to sustain itself. People who hide behind lies often grow careless, tired, or overconfident. Situations evolve, circumstances change, and the carefully constructed facade begins to show fractures. Resilience doesn't force this, it allows it. There's also a deeper element. Resilience aligns with the natural movement of reality. Truth, like water, has a tendency to find its way to the surface. Resilience doesn't need to manipulate events to make this happen. It simply refuses to obstruct the process by giving in too early. It's a kind of faith in the structure of reality itself, that what is false cannot endure indefinitely against persistent presence and unwavering integrity. The role of resilience is to hold the line long enough for truth to do what truth does naturally. When someone remains resilient in a situation where deception and manipulation are at play, they often become the unwitting catalyst for revelation. Their presence destabilizes the false narrative. Their patience creates conditions where truth becomes unavoidable. Those who relied on secrecy or control begin to trip over their own fabrications. What was once hidden behind layers of manipulation starts to surface through their mistakes, contradictions, or unintended disclosures. Resilience doesn't need to expose anything loudly. It simply persists until reality can no longer be concealed. The most transformative battles rarely happen on public stages or in moments of applause. They unfold in silence, often when no one is watching, in spaces where your thoughts echo the loudest and your vulnerabilities feel most exposed. These unseen battles are not fought against external enemies, but within the intricate landscape of the psyche. They happen at night when doubt creeps in, during moments of isolation when old wounds resurface, and in the quiet spaces where your deepest fears and unresolved conflicts emerge without warning. These inner confrontations shape character in ways that outward victories never can. They strip away illusions, challenge identities, and forge a kind of strength that cannot be faked. Unseen battles are powerful precisely because they target the core, not the surface. When you're in an external conflict, you can often rely on visible strategies, clear goals, or tangible allies. But inner battles demand something far more complex: self-honesty. You cannot outwit your own emotions or manipulate your shadow into silence. The parts of you that surface in these moments are raw, persistent, and unfiltered. They don't care about your public image or achievements. They care about truth. This is why many people fear inner battles more than external struggles. The outer world can often be negotiated with. The inner world refuses to settle for anything less than authenticity. These battles often begin subtly. A thought lingers longer than usual. A buried emotion resurfaces unexpectedly. A long-held belief begins to crack under the pressure of lived experience. You might try to dismiss it, distract yourself, or drown it out with activity, but the psyche has a way of circling back. What remains unresolved does not disappear. It waits. It waits for the quiet moments when your defenses are down and your attention is turned inward, even if unwillingly. This is where transformation begins, not in the avoidance of these confrontations, but in the willingness to face them. Unseen battles are uncomfortable because they demand that you confront the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. In public, you can maintain a consistent image, but in private, your insecurities, contradictions, and wounds stand exposed. You might discover that some of your motivations are not as pure as you believed, or that certain fears still hold more power over you than you'd like to admit. These realizations can feel destabilizing, but they are essential. Transformation requires truth, and truth often arrives disguised as discomfort. During these inner struggles, the psyche brings forward forgotten fragments of the past, moments of shame, betrayal, abandonment, or failure that were buried because they were too painful to process at the time. But these fragments never lose their emotional charge. They continue to shape behavior, influence decisions, and create patterns beneath awareness. Unseen battles bring them into the light, forcing you to confront not just the memory, but the emotional imprint it left behind. This confrontation is rarely dramatic. It often involves long periods of reflection, emotional turbulence, and a gradual dismantling of defense mechanisms built over years. There's a particular kind of strength that develops only through these private confrontations. It's not the loud, heroic strength celebrated in stories, but a quiet resilience forged through facing parts of yourself that you once avoided. This kind of strength doesn't announce itself. It settles deep within, altering how you move through the world. People who have fought and survived unseen battles often carry a depth that is difficult to articulate. They become less reactive, more grounded, and more attuned to the complexities of others because they have navigated the complexities within themselves. Unseen battles are also transformative because they reveal the structures that shape behavior. Many of the patterns people live by are unconscious. Habits, coping mechanisms, belief systems inherited or formed during formative years. Inner battles expose these structures by creating tension between who you were conditioned to be and who you are becoming. The friction between these forces can feel overwhelming, like being torn between two selves. But in that friction, transformation takes place. Old identities crack, outdated narratives dissolve, and new possibilities begin to emerge. These battles are rarely linear. Progress doesn't happen in neat, predictable steps. You may feel like you've resolved something only for it to resurface later in a different form. This cyclical nature is not failure, it's how deep psychological transformation works. Each return to the battle allows you to confront the issue from a new level of awareness, peeling back layers that were previously inaccessible. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes something you can sit with, examine, and integrate. The transformative power of unseen battles also lies in their ability to cultivate authenticity. When you face your inner world honestly, you can no longer live comfortably behind masks. The false selves you constructed to gain acceptance or avoid pain start to crumble. You stop chasing approval that doesn't align with your truth, and you begin to act from a place of deeper alignment. This authenticity often unsettles others who are not used to it, but it also attracts experiences and connections that resonate more genuinely. In moments of unseen struggle, you also learn to differentiate between strength and avoidance. Avoidance can mimic strength temporarily, appearing composed, in control, unaffected, but it eventually fractures under sustained pressure. True strength is born from acknowledgement, not denial. It emerges when you allow yourself to feel the discomfort fully, to understand its roots, and to choose growth over suppression. This kind of strength cannot be taken away by external events because it is built from within through battles no one else may ever see. There's an intimate solitude to these transformative moments. Even if others support you, the actual work happens alone in the spaces between thoughts, in the quiet after an emotional storm, in the decision to face the next wave rather than run from it. This solitude isn't isolation, it's the crucible where transformation occurs. It is where old versions of the self dissolve and new ones begin to take form. Many underestimate this process because it lacks spectacle, but it's here in the unseen that the deepest changes happen. These battles demand patience and courage, but they also offer something invaluable: integration. They bring together fractured parts of the self, allowing you to operate with greater wholeness. They dissolve illusions, clear emotional residue, and open pathways for new ways of being to emerge. External achievements may build your reputation, but it is these unseen struggles that shape your essence, determining how deeply you can live, love, and create in the world around you. Fate is often misunderstood as a force that waits in the shadows, ready to deliver punishment to those who do wrong. Many people imagine it as a kind of cosmic judge balancing scales through suffering and reward. But fate does not act like a stern authority figure handing out sentences. Instead, it operates through illumination, revealing what has been hidden, bringing to the surface what people try to bury, and exposing the inner truths that shape outward lives. Fate doesn't punish, it shines a light on the concealed dynamics of the psyche, relationships, and choices, often in ways that feel uncomfortable but deeply transformative. This illumination is rarely immediate. Fate has patience, and its method is subtle. Instead of striking with sudden vengeance, it orchestrates a slow unraveling of masks and illusions. Lies can last for a time, manipulation can deceive for a while, and avoidance can delay consequences, but fate moves quietly beneath the surface, aligning events in such a way that what is concealed eventually finds its way into the open. This is why people sometimes experience moments where everything hidden seems to surface at once, as if the universe has suddenly decided to reveal all the truths they were trying to escape. It is not random, it is the culmination of threads that have been weaving together silently for a long time. The idea that fate punishes is rooted in fear, but the reality that fate illuminates is rooted in truth. Illumination is not vindictive, it is inevitable. It does not need to impose external suffering because the act of bringing the hidden into the light is often disruptive enough on its own. When someone builds their life on deception, whether toward others or themselves, fate's illumination eventually exposes the cracks in that foundation. People may interpret the fallout as punishment, but what they are really experiencing is the collapse of illusions they depended on to maintain control. Fate's illumination is particularly powerful in human relationships. People can hide motives, disguise insecurities, and maintain appearances for years, but these masks are temporary. Over time, subtle patterns emerge, words and actions begin to contradict, true intentions leak through gestures, silences, and reactions. Fate doesn't rush this process because truth revealed too early can be ignored or denied, but truth revealed at the right time becomes undeniable. It is through this timing that fate operates not as a punisher, but as a revealer. The exposure of what is real often destabilizes false structures, leading to what may feel like chaos, but it is actually the natural consequence of illumination. For those who harm others, fate's illumination often comes in the form of their own behaviors, circling back to confront them. This isn't punishment in the moralistic sense. It's the psychological reality that what is projected outward eventually returns inward. A person who manipulates others eventually becomes ensnared in their own manipulations. Someone who builds power through fear eventually lives in fear themselves, because the same structures they created to control others also shape their inner experience. Fate reveals these dynamics over time, not through deliberate infliction of pain, but through the inevitable unfolding of cause and effect within human behavior. For those who have been wronged, fate's illumination can be equally transformative. It doesn't erase the harm, but it gradually brings clarity. The truth about others' intentions, hidden alliances, or unspoken resentments eventually surfaces. The resilience of the person who endured becomes the backdrop against which others' actions are revealed for what they truly were. Fate doesn't need to orchestrate revenge. It allows time, truth, and human nature to do the work. What was once confusing becomes coherent, not because fate punished anyone, but because it illuminated what was always there but unseen. Fate's illumination also operates within individuals, exposing inner contradictions and unacknowledged truths. People often carry hidden motives, fears, and unresolved wounds that shape their decisions without their awareness. They may pursue ambitions that do not align with their deeper values, or cling to relationships that reflect old patterns rather than current needs. Over time, fate arranges circumstances that bring these hidden dynamics into focus. This might take the form of repeated challenges, emotional breakdowns, or sudden realizations that shake their sense of self. These are not punishments, they are illuminations designed to reveal the inner forces driving their lives, so that genuine transformation becomes possible. This process can be disorienting. When fate illuminates, it can feel like the ground is shifting beneath your feet. People may lose jobs, relationships, or identities they believed were stable, not because fate is cruel, but because those things were built on foundations that could not withstand the light of truth. The discomfort of illumination often pushes people to evolve, to face aspects of themselves and their circumstances they previously ignored. This is why moments of upheaval, while painful, are often followed by periods of profound growth. Illumination clears away illusions, leaving space for something more real to emerge. Fate's way of illuminating is also deeply interconnected with time. What remains hidden often requires specific conditions to surface. People may not be ready to face certain truths at earlier stages of life. Circumstances may need to align in complex ways for a particular truth to become undeniable. Fate patiently sets these conditions, sometimes over years or even decades, so that when the moment of illumination arrives, it has maximum impact. The timing may seem mysterious, but it is often precise, occurring at points of personal or collective readiness for revelation. This illumination doesn't discriminate between individuals. Everyone carries both light and shadow, both truth and illusion. Fate illuminates not to favor one over the other, but to reveal what has been concealed so that it can no longer unconsciously shape lives. Those who resist this illumination often experience it as punishment, because the truth's surface can dismantle long-held beliefs or identities. Those who accept it may find it liberating, though not without discomfort. Either way, the illumination happens because fate is less concerned with comfort and more concerned with truth. The transformative power of fate's illumination lies in its impartiality. It doesn't pick sides, it doesn't hold grudges, and it doesn't rush. It simply reveals. It allows consequences to unfold naturally, hidden motives to surface through patterns, and concealed realities to come into view through the gradual erosion of deception. This illumination is not a threat, it's an inevitability woven into the fabric of existence. The longer illusions are maintained, the more dramatic their exposure often becomes, not because fate is punishing, but because prolonged concealment makes the eventual revelation more impactful. In this way, fate acts like a relentless light slowly moving across a landscape, revealing every hidden corner, exposing what was once cloaked in shadow, and making visible the truths that shape destinies, whether people acknowledge them or not. Endurance of the spirit is a quiet force that unsettles people in ways they often don't understand. It doesn't rely on loud declarations or visible victories. It persists calmly like a mountain unmoved by the winds. This kind of endurance becomes more than just personal strength. It becomes a mirror, one that reflects the hidden realities of those who observe it. When someone cannot break your spirit, despite their attempts, your endurance confronts them with truths about themselves they would rather not face. It reveals their insecurities, exposes their motivations, and silently challenges the illusions they've built to maintain a sense of control. Many people try to shape the world around them to avoid confronting their own shadows. They manipulate situations, project their insecurities onto others, or build narratives that keep them safe from uncomfortable truths. When they encounter someone whose spirit does not yield to these tactics, they lose a kind of psychological leverage. Your endurance disrupts the stories they tell themselves about power, superiority, or moral righteousness. Suddenly, their strategies lose effectiveness, and what remains is the reflection of their own fragility mirrored back at them through your resilience. This mirror effect is not intentional on your part. It happens naturally when endurance meets projection. People project their fears, weaknesses, and desires onto others to avoid owning them. If they expect you to crumble and you don't, their projection has nowhere to go but back to them. The discomfort they feel is not caused by you directly. It's caused by their own reflection staring back at them, undeniable and unaltered. Your strength becomes a kind of psychological surface upon which their hidden truths are revealed. Your spirit's endurance highlights contrasts they would prefer to ignore. For example, someone who relies on control may see in your endurance the freedom they lack. Someone who masks their insecurities with aggression may feel threatened by your calm refusal to engage. Someone who builds their identity on superiority may be unsettled when their attempts to diminish you fail repeatedly. In each case, your resilience acts as a mirror that silently reveals the gap between who they pretend to be and what they truly are. This gap, once exposed, can create tension they cannot easily escape. This mirror is powerful because it removes excuses. As long as someone can blame others for their behavior, they can avoid self-confrontation. But when your spirit remains unbroken, when you don't collapse under pressure, their usual explanations fall apart. They can no longer say, "I reacted this way because you made me." They are forced to see that their reaction is entirely their own. Endurance reveals their lack of control over themselves, and that realization can be profoundly destabilizing. This is why some people grow increasingly hostile or defensive when faced with someone who quietly endures without retaliation. They are not fighting you, they are fighting what your endurance reflects back to them. In many situations, endurance outlasts deception. People who manipulate or deceive often expect their narratives to dominate reality. They rely on others giving up, doubting themselves, or succumbing to emotional exhaustion. When you don't, their narratives begin to unravel under the weight of time and their own contradictions. Your endurance acts like a steady mirror they can't turn away from. It doesn't expose them through confrontation. It exposes them through consistency. The longer you stand, the clearer their hidden motives and inner fractures become, not because you reveal them, but because their own behavior does when met with unshakable resilience. This mirror effect also plays out in power dynamics. When someone holds authority and uses it to dominate or control, they often rely on the compliance or fear of others to maintain their position. Endurance undermines that dynamic by refusing to be psychologically conquered. You may not have more power externally, but your refusal to let your spirit be broken erodes their sense of absolute control. They see in your endurance a challenge to the narrative that their authority is unquestionable. The reflection they encounter is their dependence on submission to feel powerful, and that realization is difficult to face. In personal relationships, your endurance can bring underlying truths to the surface in ways that words cannot. When someone repeatedly tries to provoke, manipulate, or diminish you, and you remain emotionally centered, it forces them to confront the reality of their own actions. They can no longer hide behind the illusion that their behavior is justified. Your endurance removes the emotional fog that often keeps unhealthy dynamics alive. Their discomfort grows not because you've attacked them, but because your strength silently confronts them with their own patterns. The endurance of the spirit also has a way of illuminating hidden dependencies. Some individuals rely on others breaking down to maintain a sense of superiority or to avoid facing their own inadequacies. When you endure, you disrupt that dependency. They can no longer define themselves through your collapse. Your persistence forces them to exist without the crutch of your defeat, and for many, this is unbearable because it reveals how much of their identity was built on controlling someone else's emotional state. This mirror cannot be escaped because it isn't something you hold up deliberately. It's something that exists through your very being. As long as your spirit stands firm, their reflection remains visible. They may try to distort it by projecting blame, spreading narratives, or escalating their tactics, but these efforts only reveal more of their inner landscape. The harder they try to avoid what your endurance reflects, the more entangled they become in their own psychological shadows. Your endurance also interacts with time in revealing ways. In the short term, they may convince themselves that their view of you is correct, that their tactics will eventually work, that your resilience is temporary. But as time passes and your spirit remains unshaken, the mirror becomes unavoidable. Patterns emerge. Their inconsistencies grow more visible. The truth of their intentions becomes clearer, not through argument, but through the slow erosion of illusions against the steady presence of your resilience. Time amplifies the mirror, making it harder for them to maintain their self-deceptions. Endurance does not have to be loud or dramatic to be effective. In fact, its quiet nature often makes it more powerful. People expect confrontation or collapse. They are not prepared for calm persistence. Your spirit's endurance disarms their expectations and leaves them face with themselves. And in that reflection, they see the fears they tried to hide, the weaknesses they tried to deny, and the truths they tried to bury beneath control, projection, or manipulation. This is why your endurance unsettles them so deeply. It is not simply resistance, it is revelation.